Well, I've spoken a lot about dragons, being one myself. As you know, Koryu, my Dharma name, means bright dragon or dragon of light. But there's a missing element here that I really haven't spoken of. The month after I became a sensei and got my Dharma name, I took a wonderful 2.5-week tour of China. And toward the end, we were down south in the town of Guilin, after having taken a cruise down the Li River, and after having done the Yangtze as well. But the Li River is where you see these famous tall limestone cliffs, tall limestone cones, typical Chinese photographs, of these limestone cliffs. But not many tourists stay overnight, but we did. We stayed in Guilin, and it was a hot summer night, and at night, in the late evening, I went out along the river. And hundreds and hundreds of people were out, and I was walking along a couple miles to the bridge. It was really fantastic because I was literally the only Westerner out on the street, and it was quite striking for me. But I bring it up because the barricade, or rather the structure along the river, was dragon, phoenix, dragon, phoenix, dragon, phoenix, dragon, phoenix, all the way along. So what we don't pay enough attention to is the phoenix part. You're not even really aware of it. Now, the masculine dragon is considered to be masculine, and then the complement is that the phoenix is considered to be feminine. Now, just a little background to this. When I was in Cambodia the next year, I noticed a difference. And this goes back to, closer to the Hindu tradition, the pre-Buddhist tradition, where there's a little bit of a reversal. You can see that in the iconography all over Cambodia and elsewhere. There you see that the serpent is it's like unrefined or unreformed Kundalini energy. Almost like it is in the dragon in the West. Primitively, it's considered more feminine, the dark, nighttime, feminine type energy. And in contrast to that, you have the Garuda. You may know that's the national bird symbol of Indonesia from its pre-Muslim past. Has also had Garuda Airlines, which is in the Indonesian Airlines. Garuda is the big bird that devours the Nagas, the pre-dragon serpent that we're talking about. So there you have the masculine being the bird and the feminine being the snake, and theirs it's more to consume or to fight with the spiritual energy, the bird fighting with the primitive energy. On the Mexican flag today, you still have an eagle fighting with the serpent, kind of almost like also in the Christian, the Virgin Mary, interestingly feminine, overcoming the serpent. So yeah, all that kind of imagery is there. So I was always distressed when I found in Zen lore, all the way into the Chinese tradition, stories about the Garuda bird eating up the dragon. And I said, "Crump!" But really what it is a carryover from the past, where the dragon was less of a benevolent or enlightenment symbol, and the Garuda was the spiritual energy coming, almost like the Holy Spirit and the dove in the Christian tradition, the spiritual energy coming down to control and consume the dragon. But not then in the Chinese iconography. So this is a good example of what I'm talking about. This was a gift from Russ Michael from the White Plains Zendo some years ago to me, and it's very expressive. Maybe the camera can get a shot of this too. So here you have the dragon, the golden dragon. Here. But as forming part of a spiral, you have the phoenix. And I like this because it shows that there's an interplay of the energy. In fact, The phoenix is almost really like a bird. It has a flower in its beak, and it's almost like a bird of paradise, almost like a peacock with this blue, which is the symbol of which is the color of enlightenment, and the peacock feather. Now, my yoga teacher pointed out that the peacock feather, and I have one in my room at home for this reason, is also a symbol of enlightenment, because you have the pearl of consciousness, at the head of the feather here. So here you actually have that. It's like a peacock feather and the pearl of consciousness. But the better symbol of the pearl of enlightenment is right here. As you know, in Chinese iconography, is the dragon usually has either in his mouth or in his claw the flaming pearl of enlightened consciousness, of wisdom. And there it is in the middle. So it's as if they're both circling and they're both contributing to it, which is how it works. The Kundalini energy is the interplay of the masculine and feminine, the spiritual material, in the constant interplay to bring about the flaming pearl of wisdom, of enlightened consciousness. So that's, I think, very expressive. And even the red color, by the way, of the pillow, you can say, for example, in the Kabbalah, you have the red is the symbol of earth, the red earth. Dam in Hebrew means blood, and Adam, Adam is from the earth, blood. But it's also the symbol of fire, the highest level. So you have, again, the blend of the two symbols for red, the earth and heaven, the earth and fire coming together here. But the fire is specifically here on this flaming pearl. Now, this is where and this is better known in the West, is it not? Greek mythology, etc. The phoenix, what's special about the phoenix? The phoenix burns itself up, turns to ash, and then rises again. That's exactly what happened. And that's what we mean in Christianity by the passion and resurrection, by death and rising. It's all right there, as eternal wisdom exemplified, especially in Christ. But here you have, so the fire itself, this divine fire, comes down and burns up the merely material, the unredeemed Kundalini energy, if you like, and then you rises again, literally rising, the flame rising. John of the Cross speaks of this too in our Christian tradition, about the divine flame coming down and first of all turning us to ash. We're like a black log, and we're blackened by it, and then we're purified by it, and then we turn into the flame, like the log becomes pure fire, and become the living flame of love, as he calls it, in that spirit, the fire of the spirit coming down, and the tongues of flame. It's right there in our Christian symbolism as well. So the element of fire is paramount here, as both the purifying and then the vivifying element of divine life, divine fire, if you want to call it that, the absolute energy of the cosmos. So that's very expressive, even in the Western tradition, that transformative fire. That's interesting to see how that plays out in other versions of this in the West. For example, the Firebird. You probably all know that Stravinsky, 100 years ago, wrote the Firebird Suite, and he took this Jewish, Slavic, Russian legend, and he was all those things, of the Firebird. And apparently the Firebird in its manifestation was half bird and half woman. Interesting. Feminine. Phoenix. Or in French, there's what's called the merle d'or, the golden blackbird. Excuse me? The golden black. Well, there you have it. It starts black, it's hidden there, but it's really gold when it's fully manifest. But what I really enjoyed when I researched this was the story of the golden bird from the Brothers Grimm. Oh, but before I get to that, let me get to the phoenix in Harry Potter. Hope you're a Harry Potter fan. The red phoenix in Harry Potter, who belonged to whom? Dumbledore, the great wise God the Father figure, mentor figure. The phoenix belonged to him, and if you were loyal to him, the phoenix was on your side. Now, in the Chamber of Secrets, the second book, the phoenix is called the help of Harry Potter. He's about to slay the big snake, Nagas, the villain, big villain, Nagini. Nagas, right from Hinduism, which is the whole point. But another aspect of it is the tears of the phoenix heal your wound. Even a mortal wound will heal it. And this reminds me of, again, the Tibetan Buddhist tradition where you had the white Tara and the green Tara, these feminine figures who rise from the tears of the Bodhisattva of compassion. Interesting. So that element of tears and compassion, what purify and give life and heal, is attached to this imagery as well. But to get back to the golden bird from the Brothers Grimm, now, there are, of course, always lots of different versions of fairy tales, but all the elements of this are really interesting, and I'll bring out the Zen significance at the end. But you have a story whereby a king's apple tree, there we are, like an apple tree like Eden, at night something comes to rob the apples, or an apple. So the youngest son of the three sons, and of course it's always the youngest son, like in David, King David, who was the youngest son, or Jacob instead of Esau. It's always the underdog, not the one you would expect, who turns out to be the wisest. So he stays awake and sees that it's the bird, the golden bird, who's coming to take the apple of, I don't know, the pearl of wisdom, if you like. But of course, he only gets a feather, not the whole thing. So it's like the first taste of pursuit of life, or like in the ox herding pictures that we've talked about in the Zen tradition. You just see the tail or the footprint at first before you actually get the whole reality of wisdom. So he goes off in search of it, and he encounters a talking fox. There are always animals here, because the animals, your totem speaks to you, those elements of your being. And he tells the sons, but especially the youngest son here, on your journey, don't stay in the bright, merry inn. Stay in the bad, dingy inn. So the two other sons get all distracted and drunk by all of the candles and all the life, and instead of going to this dingy inn. St. Teresa of Jesus calls our life here on earth as a one-night stay in a bad inn. So you got to accept, the pains and difficulties of life, and don't always go for the bright distractions along the way. Or as St. John the Cross says, don't stop to pick the flowers on your path. So there's a lesson right there. When they do find the bird in a castle, it's always a castle like the inner castle. It says, don't use the golden cage, use the wooden cage. Don't always go for the gold. There are hidden riches in what's simple and unprepossessing. So, of course, he doesn't, and he makes a mistake. Then they go on a search for a horse, and the horse is also a symbol of enlightenment. I once saw a statue of Vishnu, which is horse, like Ganesh with the elephant head, show that the material energy has gone up to the head, which is where it's supposed to go. Anyway, it says, don't use a golden saddle, use another saddle, a leather saddle. So that it's continuing, this constant continuing purifications and challenges and chores, which they fail usually, but they continue on their journey. Find a princess. Oh, there's Sleeping Beauty. That's the feminine there. So the princess is in a golden castle. All right. You're not allowed. Tell her not. Don't let her say farewell to her parents. What does that remind you of? Jesus saying, let the dead bury their dead. You come follow me. Don't go back to your house and say goodbye to those at home. Don't look back to what you're leaving behind, or turn into a pillar of salt. Move forward. Make sure you continue to move forward. finally, well, there are other elements of the story, but he gets pushed into a well by his brothers. Remind you of anybody? Joseph, so pushed into the pit by his brothers, or Jesus in the tomb. You've got to go through that death experience and sometimes betrayals. And then finally, the son comes back dressed in a beggar's cloak, which we all are. We're just dressed in our beggar's cloak. That's all we are, as beggars. Even if we're king's sons, as we are also. And finally, the fox tells him to cut off the fox's head and feet. Part of that's the dying part. Some part of you has to die in order to rise again, like the phoenix from the ashes. And then the fox is revealed to be a brother of the princess. Of course it is. It's all royal. It's all powerful. So to quote Lord of the Rings, all that's gold doesn't glitter. So it's the unprepossessing, it's the ordinary, it's the beggar's cloak, it's the leather saddle, it's the wooden cage, it's in the everyday, it's in the simplicity of the everyday that you're going to find the wisdom, that you're going to find the transformation. The fairy tales all know that, and that's the lesson. That's the Zen lesson of it. You're going to find the wisdom, whatever symbol you use for it, bird, fox, whatever. It's going to be in the everyday. It's going to be, as Joshu says, in washing your cup after breakfast. It's going to be in making the coffee in the morning. That's why the Zen. That's why you have this tea ceremony with Zen. It's a reminder that it's the simplest things are where the wisdom is hidden, not in the flashy stuff, which is usually a distraction for the ego. So we can hopefully allow this transformation to take place within us, the interplay of all these energies, to let the fire burn us up and then resurrect us again to become the fire, to become the flaming pearl of wisdom, and do the divine dance of the interplay of the energies here, dragon and phoenix, as masculine and feminine get integrated within us. So, any comments or additions from your own reading or your own experience, or questions about this? I find the imagery, like archetypal stuff, mythological stuff, fairy tales, that can be very useful, not only for instruction, but as catalysts. They're kind of like energy centers in themselves. They have power with them. Symbols do. So use that.
Is there one that really leads the way, or is generally the leader?
That's a good question. Traditionally, we always see the masculine as initiating and then the feminine as responding, which you can interpret here. But I've come to realize that one is not more primordial than the other. In theological terms, God is not first masculine and then feminine. It's all of that together. One does not precede the other. So, but in terms of both elements have to be there at the same time. Both the spiritual energy and the from above and below have to work together simultaneously. How it works out in an individual life, or an individual case is not predictable. Anybody else before we have a little sitting so we can get burned up? Maybe leap up as a living flame. I want to see that. Okay.